Hey everyone, it's David, your professor. I'm going to be a disembodied voice here for a little while so I can just tell you a little bit more about the writing project. Um, if you are still a little confused about what to do, I'm just going to walk you through some of the basics. So, first, I've gone into Angel and I've gone to lessons, and then the sculpture and architecture assignment is within lesson 2. And if you click on that, there's a description which I've already downloaded over here, and we'll take a look at it. And then this is the place you're going to upload the photos, and this will be where you upload the essay. And then here are some resources that are referenced in the directions. So I don't want to read through all of this. I think you're capable of reading yourself, obviously. But I do want to highlight some things regarding the essay. First, I'd like to say this. I know a lot of people, including myself most of the time, don't especially enjoy writing, especially an essay. But the reason that we ask you to do it for two reasons. Um, three reasons really. One, it's hard and it makes you think. Anytime you have to think about what you need to say and you want to say it intelligently and put it on paper, it can be challenging to most people, and that's a good thing. Second, this course satisfies research requirements, which is why it transfers to most any other university, and why it's required, because research is an important part of your education. And third, if you're at Gwinnett Tech because you're getting something like a certificate or a degree that's very practical and career oriented, it may not seem like writing is important now, and you tend to resent having to do it because of that very fact. But keep in mind, as you rise through the ranks of whatever occupation you end up doing or having, whether it's you're a nurse or a heating and air technician and working for a big company, or you have your own company, chances are you're going to find that you develop a certain skill set or level of expertise that other people may not have, and they may want to learn more about it. So it's certainly possible that you'll find yourself in a situation in the future where you've been asked to do a presentation or present a paper. It happens more often than you think, especially if you end up being a member of some guild or other. Sorry about the pop-ups. I don't know how to turn those off. So, all right. So if you look at step 3, which has to do with the essay, basically you're going to pick 3 pictures, 1 relief, 1 architecture, and 1 sculpture, and you're going to compare that to an historic sculpture, an historic art piece, an historic relief, or an historic piece of architecture from the book. You can pick anywhere in the book, but it may make the most sense to pick some of the areas we're going over, so it'll reinforce some of the Greek and Roman architecture that we are going to talk about eventually. So having said that, you're going to pick those, you're going to compare and contrast them in 2 to 3 pages. And the thing I guess I want to point out, in addition to everything that's written here, is about thesis statements. So first, let's just talk about the compare and contrast. So you're gonna take a look and you're gonna compare one sculpture to another sculpture. This sort of details some of the ideas and things you should think about when you're looking at the historic piece versus the modern piece. And then be really careful to understand how to embed photos. You're going to need to know how to do this for the virtual museum project. So if you don't know how to do it in Word or whatever other program you're using, you really need to learn how, because it's something, again, that you'll need in the future, but also you're going to need it for this class. Um, and it can be taught easily by anyone at one of the computer labs, or you could just look it up on the internet, and there will be detailed instructions for different software programs. So embedding pictures and then also citations is absolutely necessary. Again, this is preparation for the virtual museum project. There are lots of resources for learning how to do citations. As I said at the beginning of the course, you must read for this class. So if you have no idea how to do an MLA citation, just go under Lessons, click on MLA Style Guide, and there's several resources here for walking you through it. It gives you tons of examples, so you can literally just copy one of those examples, and you should be fine. It's not rocket science. You can manage it if you just invest 15 minutes in learning how. And then, quite honestly, once you learn how, it's pretty straightforward from there. So, having said all that, I want you to realize regarding this essay and the virtual museum project that you really need to have a thesis statement that unites the entire paper. And so if you don't know what I mean by a thesis statement, then it's basically a positional statement regarding the subject you're discussing. So, and I can give you several examples in this, regarding this specific subject matter. The value of a thesis statement is it distinguishes your essay from a book report. We don't want a book report, right? We don't want you to just go, here's, this column that I found in my house, and it's compared to a column that was used to build the Parthenon, and one's made out of wood and one's made out of stone, and the one that was built for the Parthenon probably took a lot longer than to build the one that was built in my house. There you go. That's just not very interesting in and of itself. You need to go beyond that. And the way you go beyond that is you use each example, each sculpture, each architecture piece, and each relief to back up your argument, to back up your thesis statement, your positional statement. So one example, and I didn't prepare these in advance, so they may not be real good, but just work with me here. One example of a thesis statement might be, modern art, specifically architecture, sculpture, and relief, pale in comparison to the complexity and intricacy. Don't know how to spell intricacy. Let's just say complexity. In comparison to the complexity of historic architecture. I don't know how to spell historic either. Historic architecture, sculpture, and relief. This is a very broad position, right? But you could use this broad position to go on and use your different examples to prove your point. So you could talk about the complexity of a column from the Parthenon, talk about the complexity and realism of a particular Greek sculpture, and compare that to, maybe some cast concrete sculpture that's in a graveyard or near your house or even in a town square, So there's lots of examples. Granted, there's plenty of complex, interesting, historic, modern sculpture. So, but this is a position. You're making an argument, okay? And I must have spelled the word pale wrong. I'm not sure why it's underlining that, but in any case, I'm not that great of a speller, so forgive me. Another example might be something a little more practical. So, for example, you could say, it seems like most modern architecture, sculpture, and relief examples are made for mass consumption. That is, they are made so that lots of people can afford to buy and enjoy them. This is the opposite of most historic art, which was made for one purpose and generally for public buildings. So, this is a little more practical. You could talk about, maybe the architecture and the sculpture and the relief you pick is all made out of concrete. Concrete is a relatively new substance. The Romans did develop it, but certainly the Greeks didn't, and even the Romans that did develop it didn't use it very often in the construction of the really important things. They used it for roads, but they didn't make sculpture out of it. Okay, they carved their sculpture out of stone. And you can even pick a very specific example, like you could say something like, most nice banks have Greek and or Roman columns, sculpture, and relief. And the reason they do this is to convey something of the relevance and importance of Greek culture, or something like that. So, you actually could pick a specific building. Now that I've done 3 of these off the top of my head, you can't really use them right, so I'm stealing more and more thesis ideas from you, and I won't continue to do that. So, but these are intended to be examples. Now, once you have a thesis, let's just say the last one, the one about banks, now you're going to go through and in your paragraphs comparing and contrasting sculpture, architecture, and relief, you're going to constantly be referencing back to your examples. So obviously, if you use a thesis about banks, which you can't use because I just used it, but if it were something comparable, like you were talking about government buildings or what have you, then your pictures are going to need to come from that, right? So that's what I was saying. You might really need to think about this as you're picking your pictures, so that you can use those pictures to compare to historic examples, and make a good discussion that backs up your argument all along the way. I hope that's helpful. I know I didn't go through some of the things that many of you might be most worried about, which is embedding and MLA citations. But like I said before, you can read that stuff. I don't need to go over that. You can read it, comprehend it, look it up on the internet if you don't like the way it's written about, and it'll all be explained more or less clearly, enough for you to at least get a couple of citations and get them done correctly. One last thing I did mention in class, I think, to a few of you, I will be grading for spelling and for grammar. Don't think that you can just throw some sentences randomly together. I will say real quick, one problem I see all the time is the occurrence of run-on sentences. So if you don't know what I mean when I say run-on sentence, you need to Google that and learn how to not do it. A run-on sentence often occurs when people write the way that they talk. whereas we use a lot more punctuation in our writing than maybe we always hear in our talking. So just keep that in mind as you're writing. Feel free to ask me questions about that. I hope this is helpful. Sorry if it went on a little long. Thanks.